Hello and welcome back to the Crime Reel. For today's case, we return to 2008 in Surrey, England, to look at the case of 23-year-old Charlie Davies from Staines-upon-Thames. Charlie was a checkout team leader at the Tesco store in Osterley, where he had worked for several years. He was by all accounts a very popular man who was the life and soul of any group. The manager of the store where Charlie worked described him as very outgoing and said, to be perfectly honest, if you did a vote of who was the most popular person in the store, he would have won hands down. Close friends described Charlie as someone who was great fun to work with, loved being the centre of attention, and who everyone liked. He grew up with his mum, 4 sisters and 1 brother in what has been described as a nice, normal family. They lived in a quiet suburban street in an area with a low crime rate and almost non-existent violent crime. However, this would all change on the night of Saturday the 14th of June 2008. It was quite late when Charlie returned home from his shift at Tesco's that evening. As he tried to open his front door, his key would not work. As he bent down to see what was going on, a hooded and masked figure appeared behind him and poured petrol over his head. This person then set Charlie alight. An orange fireball lit up the area, and the masked person made their escape down the alleyway at the side of Charlie's home. Charlie staggered into the road, drawing the attention of neighbours who rushed to his aid. They told him to roll on the grass, hosed him with water, and covered him with wet towels until the emergency services arrived. Charlie had suffered horrific burns covering up to 90% of his body, but he was still conscious. The first police officer at the scene spoke to him, and Charlie managed to say that there was something wrong with the lock on his house and that someone had covered him in liquid. He was taken to the hospital, clinging to life. His family and close friend, Nadim rushed to be with him. Word got around amongst those that knew him, and all were in shock that their friend had been subjected to such a vicious attack. The police established that the lock on Charlie's front door had been superglued to prevent him from getting inside his house. The alleyway next to the house was searched, but it did not yield any clues. CCTV footage was recovered from a neighbouring property, which included the area at the edge of Charlie's driveway. The footage made for extremely distressing viewing. From a dark screen, there appeared a huge fireball lighting up the frame. Someone who seemed to be universally loved had been subjected to a particularly violent, brutal attack. What had been happening in Charlie's life? Who could have a motive? It was initially considered that this may have been a random homophobic hate crime, but as the police investigated further, it came to light that this was not the first time that Charlie had been a target. In the months before, there had been several other attacks, either against him or at his home address. Just over 2 months earlier, on the 31st of March 2008, Charlie had been attacked by a hooded figure wielding a baseball bat. He was concerned but tried to brush this off. Less than a week later, something had been thrown at his bedroom from outside, smashing the window. No one was found in connection with these incidents. Then around a month after the window was smashed, someone set a fire under Charlie's mum's Fiat Punto when it was parked on the driveway of their home. Homophobic attacks were not uncommon at the time, but when the police looked into this, there were no reports of any other significant attacks in the area. It would seem that with multiple attacks against Charlie only, the violence was very much directed at him individually. Charlie was funny, camp and extroverted. He had met several of his friends, including Nadim, in a bar called West 5 and had become part of the community there. The police had to question whether the attacker had a vendetta against Charlie's lifestyle and sexuality. Could it be that the perpetrator wanted to create so much fear in Charlie that he would change the way that he was living? Charlie remained in a coma with only his immediate family and Nadim allowed to visit. Nadim became the point of contact for all of Charlie's friends who were desperately awaiting news on his condition. The investigation continued and the police looked into everyone who had been in contact with Charlie in the run-up to the attack. From his phone records, it was clear that someone had been asking him what time he would be finishing his shift that evening. The texts were coming from Nadim. The police went to talk to him and found that he and Charlie had been a couple for around 2 years, with their relationship ending the previous December. Nadim remained very close to Charlie's family, who treated him like one of their own. However, friends reported that during his relationship with Nadim, Charlie became less easygoing and far more serious. The pair had moved to Manchester, and whilst Charlie was initially happy to start a new life, the cracks soon began to show. Charlie began to have less contact with his other friends, and in one conversation stated that Nadim would become quite jealous whenever he left the house or talked to other people. Charlie was becoming increasingly isolated. His support system was hundreds of miles away, and he was dealing with Nadim, who was not only controlling, but had started to become violent during arguments. Charlie decided that he wanted out. However, as he was on the verge of leaving, his and Nadim's house was burgled. Nadim convinced him to stay, stating that he was scared to be there on his own. Not long after, some of the items that had been stolen started to reappear in the house. By now, Charlie was convinced that Nadim had staged the burglary. He left and returned to live with his mother in Staines. Nadim would often turn up at their house and said that he wanted to rekindle the relationship. Charlie made it clear that he had no intention of getting back together, but was happy for them to be friends. When the police spoke to Nadim, he seemed very concerned over what had happened to Charlie. He said that he wanted to be the one to care for Charlie as he recovered, and told them that he was nowhere near Charlie on the night of the attack. He told the police that he had been with a friend on the evening in question and gave the police the friend's details so that they could validate his alibi. However, when the police spoke to this friend, she told them that on the day after the attack, Nadim had contacted her and asked her to falsely give him an alibi. She had initially agreed, but upon realising exactly what the alibi was related to, she told the police the truth. A check of Nadim's phone records also put him in the area of Charlie's address at the time of the attack. When the police looked into Nadim's past, they found more examples of disturbing behaviour. In a previous relationship, which was ended by his partner in 2006, Nadim had reportedly driven all the way to Buckinghamshire and attacked his ex's car with a claw hammer and crowbar. Whilst there was no physical evidence that Nadim was behind all of the attacks on Charlie, the circumstantial evidence against him was building. It would seem that Nadim was a dominating, controlling individual who was hell-bent on revenge. Then Nadim was arrested. When the police presented him with the evidence against him, he changed his story. He said that a friend, 27-year-old Yusuf Dulu, had driven him to Charlie's house that night as he needed to pick up a phone charger. When they arrived, he said that he had seen 2 suspicious-looking men near the address. He was scared, so got back in the car and they drove away. This story made no sense to the police. If he had genuinely seen 2 threatening-looking men that night, why was this the first time that he had mentioned them? The police brought Yusuf in for questioning. Yusuf provided yet another different version of events. He told the police that he had agreed to drive Nadim that evening after Nadim said he wanted to beat someone up who owed him £2,000. They parked near the alleyway at the back of the house. Yusuf waited in the car while Nadim retrieved something from the boot and walked up the alleyway. A short while later, Yusuf heard a scream and Nadim came running back to the car and they drove off. Yusuf claimed that he did not know what had happened until the following morning when Nadim told him that I lit him. As both Nadim and Yusuf continued to be interrogated, 12 days after the attack, Charlie lost his fight for life. This was now a murder inquiry, and it wasn't long before both Nadim and Yusuf were charged with Charlie's murder. During the days immediately following the attack, Only Charlie's close family and Nadim had been allowed to visit him at the hospital. Nadim had become the contact person for Charlie's wide circle of friends. He had also made him playlists of his favourite songs and seemed very interested in how best he could care for Charlie for the future. Was he doing this just to reduce suspicion, or maybe he was setting himself up as a saviour who would care for Charlie at the time of his greatest need? During this time he would have undoubtedly spent time alone with Charlie, and we can only hope that Charlie was unaware that the man who had attacked him was now standing over his hospital bed. When the case went to trial, Nadim denied the charges, claiming that his relationship with Charlie was better than ever. He alleged that Yusuf had killed Charlie for being gay, and that Yusuf was now trying to frame him for the crime, also as a punishment for being gay. Whilst Nadim acknowledged that he had made a request to a friend for a false alibi, he claimed that he had only done so because he was afraid that he would be blamed for Charlie's death. On the other hand, Yusuf claimed that he had nothing to do with the attack on Charlie and was unaware of exactly what had happened that night until Nadim told him the following morning. The prosecution alleged that Yusuf knew what was about to happen, travelled with Nadim and assisted him in fleeing the scene. They went on to detail how Nadim was a jealous, cold and calculated man who was determined to wreak revenge on Charlie for ending their relationship. They showed that there had been a high degree of planning involved, and that there had been plenty of times when Nadim could have backed out, demonstrating how this was not an opportunistic or impulsive act. The jury retired for 6.5 hours, after which they found Yusuf not guilty of all charges. However, Nadim was found guilty of Charlie's murder and 1 count of arson. At the sentencing hearing, Judge Charles Tilling told Nadim the various aggravating features, including the degree of planning and the particularly horrific method you chose to attack Charlie Davies. It was the culmination of a vendetta, and because of your continued denial, there seems to be a total lack of remorse. He handed down a sentence of life in prison with a minimum term of 23 years. Charlie's mother, Kay, branded the sentence disgusting, stating that life should be life, adding that, "I don't think justice has been done. Nadim is an evil spawn, the lowest form of life on this planet." Nadim will be eligible for parole in June 2032. Rest in peace, Charlie Davies. Thanks for watching today's case. Please click like and subscribe if you're new to the channel. And now it's time for subscribers' pets. Now, Petty Crime is here. First up, we have Angela from Cork in Ireland. She has sent in Princess Leia. Her Majesty is guilty of blanket stealing and hogging the best seat on the sofa in order to get the best view of the television. Nice to meet you, Princess Leia, and thank you for sending in the pictures, Angela. Judy from Wales has sent in her Netherland dwarf rabbit called Cotton Bunny. Sadly, she has hopped over to her Rainbow Bridge, but made a huge impact in Judy's life, leaving her with lots of happy memories. Okay, there'll be more Petty Crime next week. Thanks for listening to the Crime Rule. Stay safe. Goodbye. Psst. You may be looking at this name and thinking he should have said Davies, but in the UK we say Davis, and in the US they tend to say Davies. Goodbye.